Hi, and welcome back to Mood India, California Arts Association's presentation of performing arts from India. I'm your host, Arvind Kansal. Continuing our series of Indian musical instruments, today we bring to you the first part of our program on Sarod, an Indian string instrument. In the studio, I have Parag Chordia, and accompanying him on Tabla is Farhan Qureshi. Parag has learned Sarod from Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta in the musical lineage of Senia Shahjahanpur Gharana. He is also a host on Stanford Radio. Farhan has learned Tabla from Ustad Tariq Khan, and that is of the Punjab Gharana. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
So could you introduce us to Sarod and what is the construction, the basics about it?
Sure. So Sarod is a term that derives from the Persian word Sarod, which means music or singing. And as you can see, the Sarod is a plucked stringed instrument. It's one of the two major stringed instruments in North India. Sitar is the other one. And this is distinguished from the sitar by virtue of the fact that it's a skin instrument. There's a hollow resonating cavity carved out of a block of wood, which is covered in this case with goat skin. You'll also see that the fretboard is made out of stainless steel, and in fact there are no frets. This is sort of a unique feature of the sarod and something that distinguishes it from the sitar. The body of the sarod is made out of wood, either teak or tun, and you'll see there are a lot of strings. I mean, it's typical of Indian stringed instruments to have a lot of strings. But it's not really as daunting as all that. We play 4 main strings. Some older sarods, and in some styles there's even a 5th string, a lower string, but in most cases it's 4 strings. And then you'll see all these other strings. So the strings underneath are what are called taraf strings, and the taraf strings are just sympathetic strings. They vibrate when the main string is played. So that's what gives it the resonance and the full character of the sound. So here, these are not played by direct action. They're tuned to the notes of the rag that you're going to play. And this sort of gives it a very natural ambiance. It's almost like playing in a large hall.
Right.
Because you have this kind of reverberant aspect.
And the resonance.
The resonance. The other strings here are called chikari strings or rhythm strings. And basically they're used to give rhythmic punctuation to our phrases. Also very important when we play rhythmic sections such as the jor and jhala, which we'll come to later, but they're basically fast sections where we use the rhythmic strings in alternation with the main strings to create rhythmic textures.
So you mentioned that there are no frets, so how do you maintain the tonal quality?
So an interesting aspect of sarod playing is that if you can see my fingers, 3 of my fingers are long, and these fingernails are used to contact the string. This gives it a very particular quality. So if I were to play without the fingernail, with the flesh of the finger, as would be typical, say, for guitar or violin or any other kind of instrument, the sound is much more damped. Now, what's crucial in our music, first of all, you want to have a beautiful tone. Second of all, you want to be able to play meend or gamak, which are basically different kinds of ornamentation that are crucial to our music. By using this hard nail against the stainless steel fretboard, I'm able to do continuous slides. For example, now what's unique about this instrument is that there are no frets. Now the advantage of that is that my movement is unimpeded. I can slide as far as I want without any limitation. So that's great in the alap, and it gives it a very beautiful quality. Now the disadvantage, of course, is that when I'm playing distinct notes, like on violin, we have to basically just know where the position of the note is. There's no reference in terms of the frets. So that makes it a bit more difficult to play certain kinds of thans, but it's more than compensated for by the tonal beauty that it gives and the flexibility it gives us.
I see. So I have read that Amjad Ali Khan, when he gives a performance on a sarod, he has to, after the performance, file down his fingernails. Does that happen to you too?
Well, see, basically what happens is that you might get grooves because this is hard and that's hard, and in general your string is harder than your nail, so it creates grooves. And if you have a groove, it can split the nail. So you just want to file it down to keep it uniform. That's the main reason. Some people are fortunate in that they have strong enough natural nails to not require artificial nails, but then some performers, because their natural nail is not strong enough, use acrylic nails. And
really?
Unfortunately, in my case, these are artificial.
And what do you use for plucking?
So that's a good point. This is a jawa. It's called a jawa. It's basically a plectrum. In our case, it's typically made out of coconut shell. It can be also made out of, now one of the main differences, say, of our jawa, say, compared with guitar or more common picks, is that it's heavier and bigger. And that gives a very kind of, Sarod is known for the robustness of its sound, the virility of its sound. And that's the combination of this heavy pick and the full motion of the wrist. Okay? As opposed to, say, for example, sitar, where the power comes from the finger. So it's a very different plucking motion. This jawa can also be made of different materials, like plastic is sometimes used. Some people have even used ivory, but this is by far the most common material.
I know you defended your PhD thesis recently.
Yeah.
Is that in any connection to sarod playing?
It's not in connection with, well, it is indirectly. Basically, my research focuses on the intersection of music and computer science. And what I'm interested in doing is, basically I analyze music. And so similar to speech recognition, what we're interested in doing is creating tools that can in some sense listen to music. So we sort of create systems which are artificial listeners. And the reason you might want to do this, for example, in music, is because typically if you analyze music, you want to get it into a form that you can use to analyze it. Although you as a listener may be able to get tremendous intuition and emotional content by just listening, if we were to sit down and try and analyze a performance, we would have to break it down in terms of what are the phrases being used, what are the rhythms being used. Now, if we want to analyze a large body of data, we need tools to automate this process. Because even, say, take a simple thing like Tabla solo recording, there may be tens of thousands of individual events. To manually notate even one recording would take far too long if we wanted to do a comprehensive study. So what I'm involved in doing is basically creating what are called automatic transcription tools. And the eventual goal of this is once we have this kind of a tool, we can do a different kind of analysis, a much more empirically based, structural kind of analysis of music.
Also probably makes it easier to search for certain pieces that
not only search for things, but also we can analyze things like, for example, an old question in Indian classical music has to do with intonation, with Shruti theory. Basically, what is the actual location of the notes? How many distinct positions are there? Now, if we could analyze a large body of work and see, in fact, where are these notes played, how are these notes articulated, by looking at the pitch versus time, then we can say much more accurately, rather than having to rely on what somebody said in 13th century about it. We can actually do empirically based music research, and that's the eventual goal.
Very interesting. So, what are the basic playing techniques of sarod? What is it that makes it beautiful and aesthetic?
So we mentioned some of the ornaments that are central to sarod playing. So that we can kind of break down the technique into two aspects: the left-hand technique and the right-hand technique. So the left hand is what's responsible for the pitch variations, and the right hand is responsible for activating the strings, the plucking. Now, in the left hand, we talked about meend, which is a continuous glide, glissando in Western musical terms. Now, other things we can do are just straight stopping. So those are just cut notes. Now, we can also do slight vibrations, and now there are a number of different types. I'll just illustrate one. So this gives a very expressive quality when you start to introduce these these subtle ornamentations. It's really what gives the expressivity, the life of the music, are these ornaments. Now on the right hand, we basically have two basic ways of plucking. The downstroke, which we call da. In sarod, that's the dominant stroke. Now, you can get a very different tonal quality by using an upstroke. there's a difference. The first one is fuller. The second one has a sort of, it's softer but clearer. It's kind of more piercing in some sense. It's a different kind of tone, different timbre. Now when we combine the strokes, we can create different rhythmic patterns by combining these plucking patterns down and up, da and ra. So in addition to da and ra, we've also named the compound stroke da ra, which is a quick down up, and that's called diri. Now in Sarod playing, these rhythmic patterns become very important. So let me give you an example. We call them, just as in Tabla, where we name the different strokes, we name these different, the reason we name these different things is so we can talk about them. So I might say something like da diri 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 da 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 da. And if I were to play that, so by doing these different plucking patterns, we can create very kind of interesting rhythms. That's the basic idea, and it's very prominent on Sarod. So for example, a very common type of improvisation is called the dir-dir-tan. So this is a very characteristic kind of playing style on the Sarod, and its traditional Sarod baj is dir-dir-tan.
Specific to your guru and his style of playing?
So I'm very fortunate to be a disciple of Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, who is one of the, you can say in modern times, in the past 50 years, there have been three great practitioners of Sarod who have each carved very distinct styles and who have been responsible for advancing the art of Sarod playing. They are Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, and Ustad Amjad Ali Khan. Of course, in the generation previous to that, there were some luminary Sarod players, notably Pandit Radhika Mohan Moitra, who was Buddhadev Das Gupta's guru, Ustad Hafiz Ali Khan, who was Amjad Ali Khan's father and guru, and Ustad Alauddin Khan, who was the father and guru of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. Now, each of these styles of playing have emphasized different things. The most characteristic difference, and the easiest to recognize, is in the tone of the Sarod. And it's a little bit difficult to describe, except to say that each of the performers have a different tone, and a very beautiful tone. And really, it was the innovations of these performers, and even before Amjad Ali Khan, particularly Radhika Mohan Moitra, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, and Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, who enlarged the size of the Sarod. They made this resonator bigger. In fact, mine is something of a hybrid between a classical Sarod, which has a more elliptical shape, and the modern one, which has a big round thing here. Fuller shape. And this kind of fuller shape and the addition of some extra taraf strings, in the case of Ali Akbar Khan Sarod, there's a secondary bridge which even adds 4 more strings. He created a different kind of tonal ambiance for the Sarod. And it wasn't until the mid-century when these guys, Ali Akbar Khan, Vilayat Khan, were refining their instruments, that instrumental music was really able to compete in terms of just tonal beauty compared to vocal music. And it was only at that point that it started to gain popularity with these kinds of innovations.
So there's a lot of flowing similarities to how the vocal thing sounds.
Well, yeah, so under the influence, I mean, in the mid-century, there was a tremendous flowering. Even before the mid-century, in the decade, in the generation before the mid-century and up to the mid-century, there was a huge flowering in vocal music, in khayal. And they went through a kind of a revolution. The Aliya Fateh brothers sort of introduced sort of high-speed vocal tons, and that was something that was brought to perfection by artists like Bari Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab, Salamat and Nazakat Ali Khan Sahab, and others. And then at the same time, you had the kind of expansion of the Vilambat through artists like Amir Khan. So they created this whole new space for vocal music, which captured the imagination of people. Now, the instrumentalists wanted to sort of, have some kind of response. They were immersed in this culture and they loved that music. So they started to emulate some of the things. On sitar music, so I explained this sort of dir-dir-tan, which is very rhythmic and kind of, you have repeated notes. But if you want to emulate the kind of free-flowing style of vocal music, you have to change your notes much faster here. In sitar, that's very natural because the natural thing is to alternate your strokes. Here, because we have to change strings, it can kind of trip us up. So let me give you an example. The first people to do what we call ekhara, which is vocal style tan on the sarod, the first person to really do it was Radhika Mohan Moitra. And then it was taken up by his disciple Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, and Amjad Ali Khan is very, very well known for that technique as well, and he's brought it, plays it with extreme finesse and refinement. And let me just quickly demonstrate what that's like. This is the idea. Is now we're playing much faster, more free-flowing tones. It's equivalent to the akar ton of vocal music.
When you mentioned your guru, Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, how did you become his disciple?
So I was very fortunate, really, is the main thing. But what happened was I began studying Sarod. I took a year off from college and I went to India, to Pune actually, and I was studying with a guru by the name of Vasant Sanone, who plays largely in the style of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. And during that time, I started listening to a lot of Indian classical music, and I came upon a tape of Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta with Nayan Ghosh on Tabla, one of his finest commercial recordings. It came out in 1989 on Magna Sound. Has like Goshi Kannada on one side and Surdasi Malhar and God Malhar, all favorites of his. And it made a powerful impression on me, mostly because there was a tremendous balance between the rhythmic aspects of Sarod playing and the kind of fluid vocal style. And I felt it was very balanced and very complete, and however my musical imagination would develop, this was kind of the complete Sarod baj that I wanted to learn. So it sort of became my dream to become a disciple of Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta. So subsequently what happened is when I came to California for graduate school, one of his Guru Bhais, a disciple of Pandit Radhika Mohan Moitra, was staying here in San Francisco. His name is Michael Robbins, and he had the good fortune of not only studying with Radhika Mohan Moitra, but also with Pandit Gyan Prakash Ghosh. He learned tabla with Pandit Gyan Prakash Ghosh. So he was he wasn't a great performer, but he was a very learned musician, and he initiated me into the style of the Sanya Shahjahanpur playing, and I had to change my technique, and my instrument and everything really changed at that point. And it was through him that I first met Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta. He was here on tour, and he was staying with Michael Robbins at that time. And so I told him of my desire to become his disciple. He said, if you ever come to Calcutta, come to my house. So the following year in the summer, I went to Calcutta, and I basically went to his house and said, I'm here. Will you teach me? And I guess just by my good fortune and his blessings, he took me as his disciple.
Wonderful. So what piece would you play for our audience today?
So the piece I'm going to play tonight is Rag Tilak Kamod. Tilak Kamod is similar to a very well-known rag called Desh. And it's Tilak Kamod, you can see the influence. It basically comes from folk music. The basic phrasing and everything is really derived from folk music, and it's been sort of refined and abstracted into a classical form. So that's what I'm playing, Rag Tilak Kamod.
part of our two-part series on Sarod, an Indian string instrument. Thank you for joining us. Mood India's programs on Indian performing arts is brought to you by California Arts Association. We welcome your feedback and suggestions and hope to see you again. Until then, namaskar.